You are waiting for 3 words. You are sitting in a relationship, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, waiting for him to finally say I love you, waiting for him to say this is serious, waiting for him to say you're my person, as if those words once spoken will finally make real something that has not felt confirmed yet. And until he says it, some part of you stays in a holding pattern, unsettled, slightly braced. Reading every interaction for hints, for evidence, for the moment the verbal confirmation finally arrives. But here is the question nobody asks you while you are waiting. What if he already told you, just not with words? What if the answer to whether he loves you, whether this is real, whether you matter to him, has been sitting in front of you for weeks, completely visible, simply because you were taught to listen for a sentence instead of watching for a pattern? Words are the least reliable indicator of how a person actually feels, and yet we have been trained to treat them as the gold standard, the thing that finally makes love official. Meanwhile, the things that actually reveal how someone feels, consistency, effort, the small unconscious choices a person makes when they think no one is grading them, get quietly dismissed because they did not arrive in sentence form. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what to watch for instead of what to wait for, and you are going to realize that in many cases, the answer you have been waiting for has already been given. This is not about lowering your standards or accepting less than verbal clarity forever. It is about understanding that a man's true feelings are revealed far more accurately in what he does consistently than in what he says occasionally, and learning to read that language is going to change how confused you feel in your relationship. The myth is simple and deeply embedded. If he really loved me, he would say it. Silence on the verbal front gets translated into uncertainty about the emotional reality underneath it. We treat the words as the source of the feeling rather than a label that sometimes gets attached to a feeling that was already there. And so women spend enormous emotional energy waiting for a sentence, sometimes ending relationships over the absence of one, even when every other signal in the relationship points toward genuine depth of feeling. Here is what that myth gets backwards. Words are cheap to produce and require almost no risk. A man can say I love you in the middle of a conflict to de-escalate it, in a moment of loneliness to fill a gap, in a pattern of empty reassurance that costs him nothing and changes nothing about how he actually shows up. Saying the words is not evidence of depth. It is evidence that he knows the words exist and knows you want to hear them. Actions, on the other hand, are expensive. They cost time, attention, effort, and sacrifice. A man does not accidentally rearrange his schedule for someone he does not care about. He does not accidentally remember the small details of your life. He does not accidentally show up consistently week after week for someone who means nothing to him. Consistency is costly, and the things that are costly are the things that are real. The second myth is the belief that not saying it means he is withholding something deliberately, perhaps even keeping his options open. But for a significant number of men, the words feel heavier than the actions. Saying I love you out loud in a sentence that cannot be taken back can feel like a kind of vulnerability that is genuinely harder to access than simply living the feeling out through behavior. This does not excuse a man who never communicates clearly over a long period of time. Clarity matters, and you deserve it eventually. But it does mean that the absence of the sentence, especially early on, is not automatically evidence of the absence of the feeling. By the time this video is over, you are going to have a clear, specific framework for reading what a man's actions are already telling you, so that you stop outsourcing your sense of security to 3 words that may or may not ever arrive, and start trusting the evidence that has been in front of you the entire time. I want to introduce you to what I call the action ledger. Think of every relationship as keeping 2 separate accounts. One account is the verbal account, what a person says about how they feel, their declarations, their promises, their reassurances. The other account is the action ledger, the running record of what a person actually does, consistently over time without being asked or reminded. Most women have been taught to check the verbal account first. It is the account that feels most direct, most satisfying, most unambiguous. A sentence is a sentence after all. But the verbal account is also the easiest account to overdraw. Anyone can make a deposit into it with very little cost. The action ledger works differently. It cannot be overdrawn with cheap deposits because every entry requires something real: time, attention, sacrifice, consistency. And because it requires something real, the action ledger is a far more accurate predictor of how someone actually feels than anything in the verbal account. The action ledger has 3 categories of entries that matter most: 3 specific types of behavior that reveal genuine emotional investment far more reliably than any sentence could. I am going to walk you through all 3, because once you know what to look for, you will likely realize that your own relationship has already been making these entries for longer than you noticed. Let me show you what this looks like with a real example. Imagine a woman named Priya. She has been seeing someone for 5 months and he has never said the words, not once. She has started to feel anxious about it, wondering if his silence on the subject means he is not as invested as she is. But when she actually looks at the action ledger instead of waiting on the verbal account, here is what she finds. He has met her at the airport at midnight twice, without being asked, because he didn't want her taking a cab alone that late. He remembers unprompted that her presentation at work was on a Tuesday and texted her that morning to wish her luck. He has adjusted his work travel schedule twice to be present for things that mattered to her. He introduced her to his closest friends within the second month, which for him, based on what his friends told her, was unusually fast. None of these things came with a speech, none of them were announced. They simply happened consistently as a pattern of behavior that required real effort and real cost. When Priya finally looked at the full picture instead of the missing sentence, she realized something important. The man who was showing up at midnight at the airport, rearranging his schedule and remembering the small details of her life, was not a man who was uncertain about her. He was a man who was already, functionally, deeply invested. He simply had not yet found or needed the words to confirm what his actions had already been saying for months. The first entry, unprompted consistency. The first and most important entry in the action ledger is unprompted consistency, the things a man does reliably without ever being asked to do them. This is different from grand gestures which can be performed once and never repeated. Unprompted consistency is about the small, repeated behaviors that require ongoing effort. Checking in regularly, remembering plans without reminders, following through on what he said he would do, showing up on time, being present in the ways that matter even when nothing is being demanded of him in that moment. Consistency is the most reliable signal precisely because it is the hardest to fake over time. A man can perform interest for a single date, a single grand gesture, a single dramatic declaration. What he cannot easily fake is months of quiet, unremarkable reliability, because faking reliability requires the same energy as actually being reliable, and people who are not genuinely invested eventually stop bothering to maintain the performance. If a man has been consistent for months without you ever having to ask, manage, or remind him, that consistency is one of the loudest declarations of feeling available, regardless of whether it has ever been put into a sentence. The second entry, sacrifice of time, convenience, or comfort. The second entry is sacrifice, specifically, the willingness to give up time, convenience, or comfort for your benefit without making it a transaction. This includes things like rearranging a schedule to be available for something important to you, choosing to be present at an event he would rather skip because it matters to you, staying up later than he wanted to because the conversation mattered, or simply being inconvenienced in small, repeated ways without resentment or scorekeeping. Sacrifice is meaningful because it is costly in a way that words never are. Every time a person sacrifices something real for you, they are implicitly telling you where you rank in their actual priorities, not their stated priorities, their lived ones. A man who consistently chooses inconvenience for your sake is revealing, through repeated cost, that you occupy a place of genuine importance in his life. This is far more telling than any verbal claim about how much you matter to him, because verbal claims cost nothing and sacrifice always costs something. The third entry, integration into his actual life. The third entry is integration, the degree to which he has woven you into the actual structure of his life rather than keeping you in a separate, contained space. This shows up as introductions to friends and family, including you in future plans without prompting, talking about you to the people who matter to him, and generally treating the relationship as something that is becoming part of the architecture of his daily existence, rather than an experience that happens in isolation from everything else he is building. Integration matters because it reflects a man's willingness to let the relationship have real-world consequences, to let it touch his friendships, his family relationships, his future planning, his sense of identity. A man who keeps a relationship carefully separate from the rest of his life, who avoids introductions, who never mentions you to the people closest to him, is revealing something important through that pattern of avoidance, regardless of what he says when you ask him directly how he feels. Conversely, a man who has genuinely integrated you into his life, even without ever using the word love, is showing you, through structure and behavior, that you are already part of how he sees his future. So here is what you actually do with this. The first thing is to take an honest inventory. Sit down privately and actually look at the action ledger in your own relationship. Has he been consistent without being asked? Has he sacrificed time, convenience, or comfort for you repeatedly without resentment? Has he integrated you into the actual structure of his life, his friends, his family, his future planning? Write it down if you need to see it clearly. This is not about convincing yourself of something that is not there. It is about seeing clearly what may already be there, obscured by your focus on a sentence that has not yet arrived. The second thing is to stop treating the absence of words as equivalent to the absence of feeling, while also not using this framework to excuse a man who, over a long period of time, shows neither consistency nor the words. This is important, because the goal here is not to teach you to settle for actions alone forever. Eventually, in a healthy relationship, words and actions align, and verbal clarity becomes part of the relationship's natural maturity. The goal is to stop spiraling into anxiety and self-doubt during the season when the actions are clearly present and the words simply have not caught up yet. The third thing, and this is the mindset shift, is to recognize that you are allowed to trust evidence over anticipation. You do not need to wait for permission in sentence form to feel secure in something that is already being demonstrated to you, consistently in front of your eyes. Security built on what someone repeatedly does is more stable than security built on what someone occasionally says, because actions are harder to fake and more expensive to perform. Trusting the action ledger does not mean lowering your standards. It means raising the quality of the evidence you are willing to accept as proof. And if you go through this honest inventory and find that the action ledger is empty, no consistency, no sacrifice, no integration, then that too is valuable information. It means the absence of words is not the only thing missing. And that is a very different conversation, one that deserves its own honest reckoning. But for the woman who has all of this evidence sitting in front of her and has simply been taught to wait for a sentence instead of trusting a pattern, I want you to stop waiting. He already showed you. If this video helped you see your own relationship a little more clearly, whether that clarity brought relief or brought a different kind of honesty you needed, I want you to trust what you just saw. You do not need a sentence to validate what the evidence has already shown you. If this gave you something real today, hit the like button right now. It tells me to keep making the videos that go beneath the surface and help you actually understand what is happening in your relationships instead of just offering generic comfort. Every like genuinely helps this channel reach more women who need this. Subscribe if you are not already here and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. I post every week and every video is built to help you read your relationships with more clarity and less anxiety. And before you go, drop a comment below. Tell me, when you look at your own action ledger right now, what is the strongest entry you can see? Consistency, sacrifice, or integration? I read every single comment and your answer might be exactly what someone else scrolling through today needs to see.